to you for the retreat. All right. Well, welcome to another edition of Coffee and Conversation with Sarah, Dave, and the rest of these amazing, amazing people. But tonight, we have a special guest, Paul Snyder. He is going to, like I said, this guy's resume is like 5 miles long. He's got all kinds of credentials. And like I said, I probably won't do most of it justice, but most importantly, he served his country and his community in numerous ways and still continues to do that in the private sector, working on his certified threat manager credentials and being a former Marine, law enforcement officer in Arizona. Lots of different things and lots of different background. And I know Paul is willing to share some of his stories with the group tonight. And so I think I'd love to give Paul a round of applause and welcome. Welcome to the group, Paul. It's good to see you and thank you for being here.
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, we can now that you're off mute. You're good.
Awesome. I know you got the coloring book right there for me. Hold it up for me. Hey, I want to give a shout out. My parents are down there in the bottom, and I just want to acknowledge them. They obviously brought me into this world, and they're a major part of the support I've had over the years. I want to acknowledge my mom especially because the Marines that she knew when I went off to boot camp, they'd all come back from Vietnam in body bags. So you can all appreciate those feelings. Ben, I see you there as well, fellow Marine, Mesa PD, retired. And Daniel, I want to reach out to you and say thank you. I know we lost one of our MCSO brothers just the other day, and that hits hard because all my command structure, I went to the Glendale Academy. All my command structure pretty much was MCSO, and I got a lot of dear friends there through ATAP and as is. So that's hit all of us pretty hard the last couple of days. So our prayers go out to that brother, and we're just thankful that individual is where he needs to be. Lucas, I want to shout out to you too. Thank you for being on tonight. I know you're a friend of Tom and Jen's, and I've really it's a privilege to start to get to know you. And I see Max and obviously Tanya, and it looks like my brother's on there too with the Spanish Zoom. So he's a Spanish speaker. So I just want to say hello to everybody. I'm not going to promise you that I'm not going to get emotional tonight. I probably will. I've got a big box of Kleenex here, so you may see a Marine cry for the first time in your life. But I talked to our business partners who are also a veteran and a psychologist, and we partner with them nationally doing the leadership summit. Some of you may be aware of. So we kind of narrowed it down to the story that I thought I would tell that I think will hit home with a lot of you. Some of you probably have had brothers and sisters die in your arms, unfortunately. Some of us have lost brothers and sisters, either on the force or in the military. And tonight I'm really just kind of doing this to honor the 22 Marines that fell in Fallujah for my old unit. I was not with them in Fallujah, but that's my unit. And when I was back here in Lansing between two active duty tours. So I just want to shout out to Charlie Company 124 that lost those 22 brothers. And then I want to just do a shout out to Staff Sergeant Wilshire and my sergeant from Cairo at the embassy. Both of them have passed on. So two men that just made a rock solid start for me at the beginning of my career back in the early 90s. And I would not be here tonight if it wasn't for them. So I wish, higher powers blessing upon them tonight, and that they keep flying higher with the angels. I just kind of want to jump in a little bit to what Dave talked about. I'm going to jump right into my career up in Arizona, or down in Arizona since I'm up in Michigan now. I want to jump into the night that Seth Metzke got shot, and Daniel, you may remember that. I believe he was a commander. His father had been with the DPS for years, but I was still on field training officer program up there, just out of the academy. And I was with a veteran Phoenix police officer that transferred up there. It was training meeting that night. And we were on a juvenile call. And the call came out over the radio that every police officer hopes they'll never hear. And it was Seth on the south side of Payson who had just been shot 3 times. He had made a roadside approach to the vehicle. The gentleman inside was mentally deranged, and before he ever got up to the vehicle, he was shot in his arm to the side of his vest, past the protective area, and shot in the leg. So he was literally bleeding out for his life. Somehow, he was able to use the breathing that we're all taught, get back in his vehicle, and drive himself into Payson about a mile up the hill to the regional medical center. And we were coming south from the north side. We were in the pursuit for probably a good half hour. I think we got pulled out of the pursuit. It went almost 100 miles before they caught up with him, north towards the rim, towards the Grand Canyon area. Mongolian Rim, I'm sorry. And so my job was to go back to the hospital. And I can tell you, as a rookie, I'd seen death before, obviously in the Marine Corps and other places. I can tell you that night, it really woke me up as a rookie cop, because I went back, and I don't want to be too vivid here, but it was quite a blood-filled scene. And it was that night that, as a rookie, I was charged to meet his mother, meet his sister, meet his family as they were coming to the regional center there, and be of some source of comfort to them, which it seems like you can't hardly be a source of comfort to people in that situation. But did the best we could. We got him into the emergency room there, and he's been brought back there. And I remember my FTO came out that night, and he said, "Okay, you're done inside. You've helped the family as much as you can." So I went out to do the custody of the vehicle, as some of the former police officers here, firefighters, understand. And we were just waiting for state police to show up to take custody. And I remember going out to the car and sitting there and looking at this car, and all of his clothes had been cut off his body and put in a bag, and there was a yellow tape all around it and everything. And I remember just looking at the passenger side door that was covered in his blood, and thinking, that could have been mine. And I think from that night forward, I know something inside of me changed, both something I would never forget, but also something that motivated me to be extra safe on the street. I'll jump ahead to the end of the story. Seth's still alive, which is a miracle. They were able to medevac him to the hospital in the valley, and they were able to save his life. It was just some tremendous hard work by the medical staff there. And I can just remember that entire night and how it went down. And it really reminded me again that life is really short, that how you live your life matters. And as you're sitting out there, as I was sitting out there, I was thinking through the different things that Seth and I had talked about. It was a smaller town of about 15, 20,000, if some of you from Arizona know. And it just really came back to me again and again, why it's so important to make good choices in life, because you don't know when your time's going to come up. So that would be the first thing I wanted to share with y'all. It's in a book I wrote. And I want to thank Seth for that, even though he's not on tonight, because I know that was another foundational history point in my life that really reminded me that it matters how we treat people and how we live our lives. Dan, you're with corrections, right? Okay. You may remember that night, because it was all over the news. Another thing I wanted to just share, that night, not that night, but later on, when I was off FTO, I'd been out on the force for about a year. And my sergeant was just phenomenal. And I just want to touch on the point of mentors. So Les Barr is now retired and still up in the area, but he was one of these guys he's the salt of the earth. He's the kind of sergeant you'd always want to have. But he was one of the guys that says, "Hey, you don't have enough time to learn. I'm going to teach you." And I said, "Well, then give it to me, because I want to learn everything you've got before you retire. And you only got 2 years. So, Sergeant, with all due respect, you need to get busy, because I need to learn everything you got in that brain before you retire." One night we were out down by the restaurant district, and we had one of what you'd call a repeat offender that was fleeing the domestic violence scene, and we'd had interactions with him quite a bit. He had caused quite a bit of physical harm in domestic violence situation, and we were coming from all parts of town because we knew we needed to catch up with him. We didn't know at that time that night he was high on all kinds of drugs, alcohol, and everything else. And after he had committed his act of violence, as I came around the corner, he was running out to the street on a single way direction, both directions. And so literally he's in my headlights. So of course I jumped out and everybody else came running when I called on the radio. We were able to start to take him into custody pretty quickly there. It was just about probably 500 feet from the scene of the incident. At which time, a couple of the officers converged on the scene. At which time he decided he was going to fight us. So I had literally had a couple of his fingers, as some of the cops on here would know, some of the fingers getting ready to put him in cuffs, and 2-finger come along kind of move. And he was able to twist us a little bit and attack both of us that were next to him. And literally was a fight for our lives. Thankfully, it only lasted for about 30 seconds, which is what you should do, hopefully, in those circumstances. But it turned into another hour to 3-hour process with our sergeants and our other squad patrol medical people with our tape recorders running. And again, another sobering event, because he said on our tape recorders for all that time that he had planned to kill us, and we could tell by the force that he had used that night that he planned to do that. So I want to thank the trainers I had and others at the academy, the defensive tactics, those kind of things, because even though it was a 30-second period of time in my life, it's very sobering to realize somebody intends to kill you. And when you first encounter that on the street, Ben, you probably had that happen. Dave, you probably come up to that, and Lucas maybe, and Daniel. It's extremely sobering to realize that another human being, because of their mental state, would wish you harm and to take your life. So it's another experience that I know that was given another chance, and it reminded me again that how we live matters. And I remember talking with Les, my sergeant, later about that, and just being extremely thankful again that mentors, both at the academy, mentors at the force, and even the fire department friends, different things that we taught and learned together, trained in, that I had listened to what they had to say, and I had applied what they had taught me. Otherwise, I wouldn't be on the Zoom with you tonight. We had another incident that you talk about being in the right place at the right time. It would never happen, unless fate was there. But my FTO had also been on this call. In Arizona, there's the traffic laws where there's a white light to the front of a vehicle, including bicycles, on the roadway, and a red light to the rear, so headlights, taillights. And he had made a stop to do an investigative contact with the subject down by the old famous bar that was closed there in Payson from the rodeo days. And something wasn't right, and I heard it came out over the radio, so I went down there to provide backup for him. And as we were talking to this gentleman, he's in about his 50s. That something just didn't feel right. So like a cop would say, you have that sixth sense, and something's wrong. So I was just making conversation with him, and I said, hey, where'd you grow up? He said, well, Elkhart, Mishawaka. I said, oh. I said, I grew up in the Michiana area. I said, what's the name of the river that runs through Elkhart? Well, he gave me some bogus name from somewhere else. So I knew that he was lying to us. There's that technicality of the law where you're talking to someone under these conditions, and there's a contact with police. So you've got the technicality of him lying to a law enforcement officer. So now you've got a little bit of a detention grounds. It's right on that line where you can continue to talk with them. So he continued to talk with us, and our sergeant came by because he felt with something that was up, and this is Les Barr again. And he started talking to the guy, and Les had this way of just disarming people and making them comfortable. And he said, hey, we really don't have anything on you here. We just, we're not really sure who you are. At this time, he's still giving us a false name, which is very common. But he said, is there any chance that you would, you're free to go if you want, but is there any chance that you would be willing to put your finger on this machine here? It's a fingerprint machine. It would, if you have any warrants, it will tell us. And if you don't want to do that, you can walk, and it's okay. And the guy says, yeah, no problem. So he puts his finger on the machine, the AFIS machine, and it comes back, and he is literally an America's Most Wanted subject out of Scottsdale. He was the worst of the worst child predator type, and they had several warrants, and he'd been on the run for years, and he'd been hiding in our town, and nobody knew. And he'd had, as we ran his record later, he'd had 18 contacts with police and firefighters and others, but he'd always given a false name and always had some kind of legit story. So nobody really was tracking this. So that night we literally caught an America's Most Wanted felon. And I remember going home that night and thinking, even though the arrest was technically, Sergeant Mack's arrest, and I assisted that, it was one of the most satisfying arrests, I think, of my career, knowing that he would not be hurting any more children. I think for every cop or firefighter on the podcast, every mother, everybody that has a nephew and niece, I think that is something that we probably all know is not just morally wrong, but evil. And I can just say that was definitely something I will never forget, that individual is in a place now, for the rest of his life where he will not hurt other young people. So again, a great experience, not a great experience that we caught him, in a sense that, I don't want to say this. It wasn't great that he was a felon. I'm saying it was great that we caught him and took him off the street. That's what I'm trying to communicate. So I'm gonna try to get through this without getting too emotional. Tanya, really appreciate you being on. So just about 2 weeks ago, I lost my best friend, and both Neil and another gentleman I lost in my Marine years that was crushed on a farm from my teen years. Both these men have had an impact in my life that I will never forget. Neil was definitely one and Dale was the other. And I remember when I came back a couple of years ago and was helping my folks out with some stuff, and my brother switched places with me. I remember getting to know Neil, and Neil's one of these guys, like, he's like, I want to read your book. And I'm like, it's not that big of a deal. It's just, I'm just a Midwest guy. He's like, oh, you've done all this stuff. You're a ninja. I'm like, I'm not a ninja. I just had great mentors. I was in the right place at the right time. These people came along and gave me these opportunities that I would never have without them. He's like, oh, I want to read it. I want to read it. So he read it, and he came back to me and goes, dude, you left all the good stuff out. And I said, well, probably some of that probably can't be in writing. And, I'd rather not have it, reviewed, up in some place with people I don't know. And I'd rather just be a Midwest boy who grew up and had some great opportunities and made some sacrifices and, helped his country and served his fellow man. And I can tell you from the day he read that book, he just said to me, he goes, okay, we're just done with all this other stuff. I'm like, what's the other stuff? He goes, we're just going to be friends for life. I'm like, okay, what does that mean? Is this like guy love, or what are we talking about? So he said, no, it's cool, dude. It's just, we're going to be friends. We're just going to do life at the real level where you really should do life. And Tanya, I can tell you that's, your man. That's him. And, I just, I know when I reached out to you about this whole thing with the summit in the spring, and I reached out to Colonel McLaughlin and Dr. Pearl, I said, I don't know how to honor this man. There seems like there's nothing really worthy of his name. And I said, well, aren't you going to do this ultra distance thing, this hiking thing, and all that sweat and stuff and everything? I'm like, yeah. They're like, why don't you name it in his honor? Because that's something he's been a big fan of law enforcement. He led our safety team down in Goshen. Max, I can't remember if we got 30, 40 people on that team that are law enforcement sworn and firefighters from that region. It's a pretty extensive team of first responders. And Neil had never served, but I can tell you what, every single woman and man on that team respected him. I respected him. I love him. And I can tell you, for every mile that we put in for Tom and Jen from All Secure, and every mile that we put in for Blue Help next March, I can tell you that we're going to be thinking about him. And I know he's going to be looking down like, it's about time you got your butt out there and hike for me and show me some respect. But I miss him, and I was struggling with whether to share that tonight, but I thought, you know what, this group, if there is any group, I think really resonated with Jen's message last week. Right. And when Tom and Jen came into our summit, the room was full of all kinds of high octane people and military, all this other stuff. You know what really mattered? He walked in, and what's Tom? Maybe 5'8", 5'9", 5'10". He's not a big guy. Maybe 170, 175, 180, all wet. What quieted that room was Tom got to business and said, what matters is how you live your life. Right? People were thinking like Delta, he's going to walk in and be, 6'8", 300 pounds, muscles everywhere. He's not. And most of the people from Delta aren't. And what impacted me with Tom and Jen is that they said, first of all, deal with your stuff, own your stuff. And he goes, and just so you know, we're in therapy every week. So if you're afraid of therapists, get over it, because we go to therapy every week, right? And there were some pretty hardened people in our room from the intelligence community and some other stuff. And I'm looking around like, I wonder if they're listening, because some of these people pack away some stuff that they've had to do on behalf of our country. And those that you have served on the street, Todd, I know you've been on the street, and Danny, the things that we've all seen. Others of you have lost family members. And I said to Julia, it's like, what are the things that I want to share tonight? And one of the things I want to really emphasize is that I know I've never got anywhere in my life that mattered for legacy without good mentors. I've never got anywhere without good team members. I've watched other people around me get like to higher levels by themselves, crawling over people, but we all know that nobody likes them, to say it nicely, right? They can stay there for a while, but they usually have a terrible fall. And I would just say this, in the lanes that I run, and Dave, you know some of the stories, but during COVID, to the opposite of what I'm talking about, I saw some very, very big names go out. They got taken out in the executive protection world, where I've done some work and stuff, and it was sad. People I'd been with at conventions and people I looked up to, and doing stuff that you and I are like, okay, that's so far outside the law, why'd you do it? But they somehow lost, I think, the principles that I'm talking about tonight. They lost their humanity, I think, first, and then they lost their morals, and then they lost their ability to deal with their stuff that they packed away, right? So they started doing risky things, and then pretty soon, next thing you know, they're outside the law, and the next thing it's like it's justified. And I remember having a conversation with Colonel McLaughlin, our business partner, and this other person that knew this one that was taken out in California, and it's like, how do you get to the level where you're bribing law enforcement for guns, right? How do you get to the level where you are doing that stuff? And this particular professional was saying, it was a steady decline. They couldn't see it above the iceberg line, but as we all look back in this individual's life, and when his fall came, he was globally known. Dave, you probably know who I'm talking about, in California. And it saddened my heart, because I thought about all the people that he had mentored for 25 years, and he had climbed up to the highest levels, guarding people at Davos, Switzerland for the economic forum. He'd done stuff that most of us will never do. And it reminded me, when I saw him fall during COVID, that none of us are ever going to get anywhere without good people around us. And all of us are capable of making poor decisions if we get off the path. Or I think, like Tom and Jen would say, if we ever decide that we're too good and we're going to start stuffing things and we're not going to process our challenges. And so that's just kind of a takeaway that I know all of you know that from this group, but I was just reminded as I watched some of the past YouTube videos that were really, really good. And I saw different people coming on here that I respect, John McCaskill, and I think Miss McCauley was on here, the fighter pilot was on here maybe. Jennifer Tracy, some other folks that I really, really respect. They're all making a difference. But if you look at their backstory, they have tremendous tragedy and loss. I know Jennifer has just mind-numbing loss in her life that's happened. And when she says something, or when I talk to her on the phone occasionally, when I get that privilege, I listen, because I'm thinking, her story is not a story of just success. Her story is a story of great tragedy. But she's also said, you know what? I'm going to do the hard work necessary. I'm going to process this stuff, and I'm going to use this to help other people. And I think I see her doing that every day now. And Sarah, you probably know her better than I do, but I see her making a huge impact with women and men. And when she stands up to speak, everybody's quiet. So that'd be just another thing I would leave with you all tonight is, Dave, you're very kind to say all those nice words about me. And I'm grateful that those introductory remarks are true. But I'm looking back and saying, if I didn't have those 15 or 20 people in my life that even to this day I can call up, except for a couple that I've lost. I would not be where I'm at. I would not have the privilege of ever communicating part of my story. In chapter 10 of my book, for example, I lost my former father-in-law to dementia. He'd served the law enforcement community for 36 years. And, you know, in being careful, I say this, all of us respond to tragedy differently. And so I saw in that instance, unfortunately, a situation where there was a lot of what I would call poor response to the tragedy. But I know that he would have wanted me to respond the way I did. And so my path was different. I chose to take that and to walk very closely to, I don't think he's on here tonight. There's a Marine colonel that walked with me during that time. I called him up and said, hey, my life's all gone to double hockey sticks. And he's like, great. So what are you going to do about that? I said, oh, I don't know what to do. He's like, okay, well, first of all, you're going to keep your head about you, and you're going to keep your morals, and you're going to keep your standards, and you're going to go through this. That's what you're going to do. And I'm going to walk with you. And he did. He walked with me through that terrible tragedy and loss of my father-in-law passing on. We don't always see the blessings. You know, now I have this amazing bride in my life that journeyed with me, and we both came out of a similar background. But we would look back, as we've talked in our relationship, Julia and I, we've looked back and said, okay, had it not been for our tragedies, we also would not have found each other. We would not have this blessing to be working with this team of professionals. And I would just say this about Dr. Perline and Preston. I don't think they're on here tonight. They're like, go get them. You got it. And I'm like, hey, you know, what about the moral support? They're like, this is your story. But these two men, again, another example. Preston was in Fallujah. Preston was in Guantanamo Bay. He was in Iraq. He's working at the Army War College now as an assistant professor. He's a retired colonel, but he is so approachable, like everybody on this connection tonight. He is so everyday. And you look at his resume and you think mine's impressive, which is, I think it's like a drop in a bucket compared to his. But I'm like, he goes, yeah, but that's not who I am. He goes, who I am is how I treat you. And so I want to leave that with you tonight is everybody on here has got expansive credentials in your area of expertise. Every one of you has a circle of influence. There are people in your life that I could never touch, that I could never meet. Todd, you've got a path in with firefighters that I can talk trash with the hose draggers, right? And I do up here, and we have a lot of fun up here in this region with the hose draggers, and they throw back with me. But there's something different about actually having been a hose dragger, right? Having done things that are different, because you guys go in without guns and mace and everything else, right? We get to go in with all the toolkit, right? And you all go in with, you know, bare hands a lot of times, and sometimes you guys can even be the better communicators, and you can teach all of us as police officers and risk management people how to talk to people. So hats off to you, Todd, for your credibility in that community. I'm getting older here and I have a second pair of eyes, Dave. You know, I want to talk, if I could, just talk a little bit about the mission of what I'm working on now. So through the process of coming back to the Midwest and in the process of taking care of my former father-in-law and him passing on, my security or my certification lapsed in Arizona. And so I did that intentionally to make sure things were right back here in the Midwest and to transition out of that loss and tragedy in my life. And I thought that was important because of the good decisions and the good mentors I have. I've got a good track record down there. So there's a clean track record of being on the street, which is always important. I think it's opened up new doors for me here in the Midwest, you know, to talk with law enforcement brothers and sisters. Of course, Dave, you know, the first thing, like, wow, you're only caught for less than 3 years. I mean, what happened to you? Did you like mess up, you know, late for duty 5 times or whatever? And no, of course not. But it opened up the door for me to talk about my former father-in-law. And they're like, you did what? I'm like, well, it's what I felt was right. And I wish Les Barr was on here in a sense too. And he's one of these guys, like he'll push me to the front and say, no, I'm not going to be on it. You go do what I taught you, right? You go share your story. But I would tell you that Les watched me walk through that tragedy, and I went back to Arizona. I spent a couple hours with him. We talked about these stories about what happened on the street, and I said, Les is the kind of guy's like, it was all you, it was all you. I'm like, that's so stupid. Sarge just said, it was all you. I said, you took time at the 20-year mark where you're tired, you've seen everything, you've been through all the highs and lows. You were the second behind my roommate who chased the crazy guy who shot Seth, in your Hemi vehicle chasing him for 100 miles. You're the man. I'm just trying to somehow get to your level of maturity before I die. And Les would say, well, that's what this is all about, is that you pay it forward. And so Todd and Dan and Dave and others, Lucas, Sarah, you're definitely paying it forward. You told me some of your story. You're paying it forward. You are. You're being courageous and setting up this forum for people to talk. Ryan, I don't know your story, but I'm sure it's a good one. Chris, Michael, same thing. And obviously Tanya and Max, all of you, some of you, I should say, I know your story, and respectfully, I think all of you have been through your own tragedies of some sort. What I would encourage you to do is what you're probably already doing. I would encourage you to remain a part of this group and other small groups of trusted people. Dave, you can speak to this. I know you can, Sarah. Not everybody out there that says they can help you is really sincere. I wish that was the case. I wish everybody out there always was noble and honorable and all that. There's a small amount of people that aren't. Most people are. But I would say pick and choose, the people that you choose to open up your soul to. And if you're not doing that and you need that in addition to your group, I would definitely talk with Dave or Sarah or some of the other professionals on here. They probably know somebody. They could connect you, in the network with Tom and Jen. I know they're really, really good about getting people the resources. But my challenge would be to you is whatever it is you need to unpack. If there's something you need to unpack, then I would say you should do that with the right kind of people, because that tragedy is going to become part of the foundation of your life. Dave, you know this, you never forget the step, do you? It's always going to be there. But what I can tell you is, and I'm still on that journey, by the way, but what I can tell you is it can become a strength. And I know, Tanya, I love you like a sister. And I wish to God Neil was still with us. I wish to God somehow I could bring him back here and put him in our life and all that. And I know he's in a better place, and I believe in all that with all my heart. But I know one thing. I know that whatever privileges and opportunities I have, including this tonight, including working with the EI Alliance, including these summits, leadership summit, the message is always going to be the same. It's going to be the same as his life: is make it count, be there for people, be reliable, be dependable. Some of those basic things, like keep your promises, right? It's becoming harder and harder to find people that keep their promises. I believe this group is a place where you can keep your promises. And Sarah, I a little bit I've found about your life and what you shared your story. You're a promise keeper, and so are you, Dave. So I wrong, in those endeavors with each other. Gosh, I guess the only thing I'm in the process of writing a sequel. I'm going to tell you it's not going to be anything great, but I'm going to put down. I think it will still impact lives, and that's why I want to write it. It's going to be about 10 chapters. It's going to follow up from the sequel or from the first book, and it's going to be 10 short chapters about 10 mentors and the characteristics they taught me across my career. And what I hope that it does is it will touch one law enforcement life, or touch one military life, or touch one special operator's life, or somebody that has not yet found their tribe, who says, hey, this story really resonates with me. I'm going to tell a real quick story. Are you still on here, Tanya? I think you might be. You know which brother I'm talking about from the special operations community, who's come to some of our summits. And this guy is a warrior's warrior. Got tattoos from the start of his uniform. And when he runs around in PT gear, you're like, is every part of your body covered in tattoos? It is. And he's been on all the places just like Tom has his whole career. And I met up in Washington, D.C. about a year ago, and I said to him, how you doing? He goes, I'm doing okay, you know. And a couple of years ago, he was in Germany, and a friend reached into his life when he was ready to take his life and saved his life. And here's this guy at the top. If I told you who he was, you'd be like, there's no way. There's another gentleman that was thinking about being out here tonight from the special forces group down in Florida that just retired, a colonel. And he lost his Navy SEAL friend, a commander in Afghanistan, because this gentleman who was this warrior's warrior had lost too many of his SEALs. And he said to me, Paul, I wish I would have known. And so I would just say this, that every one of us has struggled with some part of our soul, with what they call the darkness of the soul, like C.S. Lewis said. At some point in our life, we're going to have struggle with that, either personal, professional, in the civilian, military, law enforcement, whatever. I would simply say this, that that makes you human. You know, welcome to the human race. That's your human race ID card, that you're alive, and that there's things in life aren't always easy. What I would say on the heels of that is you don't have to stay there. You do not have to stay there. There's some incredible research going on. I think, Sarah, you've had several people on here talking about different modalities. I'm not a fan of one specific modality. I'm not going to tell you there's one that works for every single person in every single combination. What I will tell you is it's like your biochemistry in your body. I know for me, it was a matter of fitness, ultra fitness, like ultra walking distances and stuff. I need that for my type A personality. Another part of it was nutritional supplements and getting that the way it should be. The other part of it was, you know, facing stuff like loss. And it's still, there's still a hole in my soul from where Neil's passed this last 2 weeks, but I can tell you that there's a different kind of joy because of the relationship I had with him, and I would not have had that level of brothership with him had I not gone through those other processes before. So I can tell you that it's worth it to go to that level of relationships. That's kind of all I got. Is there any questions, or sorry, Dave, no name stuff?
Well, first and foremost, Paul, thank you for sharing your story. I think, you know, it's very compelling, you know, and you're leading by example by showing vulnerability and sharing, you know, those things. And to your point, yeah, this is the right group. You have some very, very outstanding people here that I would argue that have very high levels of emotional intelligence and understand how they're feeling and are able to articulate those things and are willing to share for the benefit of others, right? And that's the whole purpose of this group. So I think that, you know, like I said, incredibly grateful that you're here. Thank you for sharing. Does anybody have any questions for Paul? I'm sure he'll be happy to answer anything you'd want to share.
I came in late, so I'd like the name of this book.
Oh, thank you.
So Paul, what's the name of your book?
It is A True Survivor's Journey to Real Life. It's on Amazon, and I don't know if Sarah, if somebody wants that. In fact, you know what you could do if somebody wants it from this group, I would just, Sarah, you can give them my email, and I can probably order an author's copy and get them something a little cheaper than what is on there on Amazon. We could do something like that for $5 or something. Cause I don't want, it's not about making money.
Wonderful.
So I'd be happy
Awesome.
to do that for
Thank
yeah,
you.
anybody that wants that.
Thank you, Paul.
I did.
And
Hey,
I'll
Dave, I
put
did
a
want
link
to
on
offer.
the YouTube too. So go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, I was just telling him that I'm going to put his book link on the YouTube description. So we'll have that on there too.
Great.
Yeah, Paul, thank you. I really appreciate hearing people share their story and be vulnerable and share their life. It just opens the door to simple connection. So I appreciate you. Thank you.
You're welcome, Sarah. You know, and I'm sure everybody here has similar stories, and we look at people's successes, do we not? We look at the the things, we look at the LinkedIn profile, or we look at the Facebook profile, or we look at the people next door and think they have it all together. We don't know what people struggle with. And one thing that convinced me to start this journey is that I have some blessings outwardly and some other successes that I've been given by mentors. And people can look at me like he's got the world by the tail. I don't, and I'm a human being just like each of you. And so I just reiterate to each of you that when we're looking at other people, we got to remember that they're human too, and they're probably, some people can hide trauma really, really good, right, Dave? And you see it later in the broken parts of their lives, like our friend in California that lost his entire career. But you know, that's not the path we want to go down. We want to go down the path of healing and in community.
Paul, again, thank you for being on. I'm gonna turn it over to my partner Sarah, because unfortunately I have to take off. But I'm sure you and I will connect again offline and chat some more about some of the upcoming events you have. Definitely looking forward to those. So,
Dave, it's a pleasure. Stay safe.
Always. Everyone else, thank you, and love you guys. And I will see you next week.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, brother. Take care, brother.
Peace out.
Does anybody else have any comments or questions?
I just wanted to say thank you to our new friend here for opening up. And man, we all have a lot to learn from you and your perspective. And I just really appreciate you sharing everything you have. And me personally walk away with a lot of things to think about and, you know, continue to reevaluate myself on a daily basis. And I think we all should. But you come to it with such a powerful lessons learned that we can all certainly learn from on your behalf. So thank you for sharing all that. And I certainly look forward to reading the book.
David, thank you. It's a pleasure meeting you.
You as
I
well.
would like to just share a couple short stories about Paul that really humbled me. He was really struggling with his mom and dad. They were going through some serious health issues, and to watch him walk through that with his mom and dad, man, it brought tears to my eyes. The way he elevated them, he loved on them. He did everything for them, and it was such an honor to watch the way a son treated his mom and dad. And the other thing was one Wednesday evening at church, we had an autistic boy that just started losing it with his mom, and Paul had a dog named Zeus. Paul went out and brought that dog in, and the dog was trained to deal with kids like that. And to just watch Paul in that element with Zeus and got that child to relax and just worked with that child and the mother to where they walked out of that church hand in hand and changed. I seen a side of Paul that just, you think of a big Paul, a Marine, then a cop, he's done all this stuff. And yet he got on his knees, eyes to eyes with this little boy and a dog, and just helped that mother calm that boy down. Paul has got a heart of gold, and he is a very, very humble person. And it is an honor to have worked beside Paul, and he has mentored me more than he will probably ever realize.
Matt, you're very gracious. That wasn't a paid advertisement, by the way. In the interest of full disclosure, Max and Melanie are phenomenal. Volunteer. They really take care of the clients, and they're not really clients. I use select clients in our marketing, but the people that come to our summits are family, and we protect them. And Sarah, we're having this conversation offline. You know, we've had people come in around it and try to use that, just that odd duck that doesn't belong inside the family. And I tell you, we were very gracious to these people. Just said, this is not the place or the time. This is family. And these are serious professionals that are growing together, and the things they're sharing are sacred. And Max, you've helped protect that. And sadly, we lost Zeus on the train track. So it was I remember Julia and I dealt with that at the beginning of our relationship. And I thought, oh gosh, all this stuff I've come through, and I'm gonna lose it over a dog. But that dog had been through 5 national certifications, and we were able to help a lot of people before he passed. And so I guess my takeaway is it's okay to love the right things deeply. It will leave a hole when they're gone, but you will have also had the blessing while you had it. And I'd rather have the blessing while we have it and help that be a blessing to other people. And Max, to your point, thank you, because you're a big part of making that happen too. So back at you.
Thank you, brother.
I'll tell you, as a mother, that means a lot to hear what Max said about you. I think as a mother of 4 boys, when somebody would pay that special attention, whether or not they have special needs or not, I mean, just to be that kind of mentor and that kind of example to a child is so incredibly meaningful. And I know for me as a mother, that means so much to me. So it says a lot about you. So
Thank you, Sarah.
I'm glad that you shared that, Max.
My parents are down there, so my mom is probably crying right now off on mute. So Mom, I love you. Dad, I love you.
This is so powerful, bro. I really appreciate you sharing. It seems to be the common thread through this group is that there's so much selfless vulnerability here, and people are just willing to throw themselves on top of the fire to help out. I think that you're taking a huge step forward and you're obviously making a huge impact on normalizing, vocalizing your trauma, and that it's okay to have that trauma and to be able to deal with it and for it to be open. I've told a lot of folks that it's never going to happen from the leadership perspective or at an organizational level. It's only going to be done at the ground roots level by people. You've been in the military, everybody says lead by example. I like to say live by example, because there's a lot of fake leaders out there. So if you just live by example, let people see that, be vulnerable, be open, let everybody see your process. And I think that's how you're going to touch so many people. And then you obviously are, man. You're very impactful. You could hear it in the emotion in Max's voice as he was talking story about you, brother. Man, you're doing God's work and you're saving lives, man. I appreciate you sharing. It's very touching. It makes me a little emotional, just the vulnerability, man. And it's awesome. Thank you for doing that, man.
Chris, it's an honor. It looks like you got some patches on your shoulders there too, right?
SPD.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Can I just respond to you, Chris, briefly? I don't know how today's time is. That okay to respond to you briefly?
Of course.
So before I went through that process, I know earlier in my career, I always was a caring person. I was raised to help the underdog. I was raised to stand up for right and wrong with my parents. But before I went through these traumas in the military and law enforcement, I don't think I really had. So I didn't have a seat at the table because I hadn't been there. What I would say now is the fact that, and for me, it's the good Lord always given me, the fact that he's given me the strength and the fitness of the things I have. Those are just platforms, but I think they give some part with you. I think the boldness of what you're talking about, regards to the size of our physical stature, it's the size of our heart and the strength. And as we say, this is normal. And Chris, you and I both know people that look like just, how do I say this? They're not Arnold Schwarzenegger, but they act like Arnold Schwarzenegger, like they're just nothing phases them. There's some, honestly, with all due respect to those brothers and sisters, are some of the most messed up people that are out there. And I worry about them because when they retire, they're higher at risk of suicide. They're higher risk of alcoholism, drug addiction, all that. I've known many of them. I love them. They're my families. But I'm like, bro, sis, what are you doing to yourself? You could be strong by unpacking this and still be productive and still be healthy. Just be smart about how you ask for help. Does that make sense?
Makes 1,000% sense. And again, I think that all of the traumas that everybody in this group seems to have gone through, it makes you that much stronger. I don't think you get stronger by all your successes. I think that you only gain and strengthen yourself by your failures and your traumas that you go through, your trials and tribulations.
Wow.
And that for you, my friend, has opened up so many doors for you to be able to open or help probably ever could have on the police department or in the Marines. Now you're touching people all across the country and probably around the world. So it sounds like you got a great family structure. Mom and dad, thank you for raising such a great man to make him so vulnerable. And again, I'm going to shut up now and just thank you again, brother.
Chris, it's an honor, man. Semper Fi.
So I'm the nurse here, so I would like to say thank you as a nurse who has worked pediatrics and dealt with children who were abused. Thank you for your work. And I also want to say, Chris said about, jumping in the fire. Okay, I don't want to jump on any more fires. I've had enough traumas in my life. I've had enough losses, enough of everything, and along with helping my patients deal with all of their stuff that's going on, I lost a nurse friend colleague to suicide.
Wow.
It's been a number of years ago, but I know that when I went through my own struggles, this was before we would publicly acknowledge or even acknowledge within ourselves that, yes, we're human too, we need help too. And it was treated differently than it is now. Now it's okay to say, I'm going in for help. Back then I was told, don't tell anyone because nobody's going to want to work with you. The whole your career is going to be over thing. And I think for me, with everything that I've been through, because I've been through it, my motto has always been, be the change you wish to see. So with all of my collective trauma, which is, I know what it's called now, if I could keep one person from having to go through the loss of losing a colleague friend, if I could, help one person from going through that dark space or from going to, take that final step to take their life, then that's what I will use to fuel, be the change that you wish to see. But it takes someone, and I'm the girl that was out in the public talking to everyone, trying to get everyone to acknowledge it's okay to go get resources. It's okay. From talking with everyone, those of us that have been through that trauma are the best ones to help and connect with the others because we can relate to them. And we can also call them on the bullshit of, I'm okay. And we can sit there and see it all and say, no, you're not.
Right. Brenda, thank you. One of the calls I had up in Payson was a sister that was a nurse, and I was out in patrol and I stopped by. We didn't have a call for law enforcement. But I just had that sense. I stopped by and I looked at my fire brothers. And they're like, yeah. And I went over to it. And I was like, it was an attempted suicide, and there was so much shame and so much all this stuff. I said, you know what? You got nothing. You got nothing to be ashamed of. I see what you see in that room. We bring people in that room. We bring all this trauma to you. You got nothing to be ashamed of. And it's totally okay, for you to get the kind of help that we've all had to get at one time in our life. I said, you do that and you're going to be okay. But it was just, I think she needed somebody to tell her that, because she's looking at me like, how could you have ever struggled, right? Because I had this thing on the street that you didn't mess with me. I was really, really nice and never had any fights except for that one night because nobody wanted to mess with me. But I was also kind to people, which goes a long way on the street. And Dave would say that, and other cops that have been here. The way you talk to people matters. And so thank you, Brenda, for your integrity and you're reaching out to other people in the nursing profession.
Thank you.
I'm going to jump in if I can. Max, thank you for sharing that, because more people have to step up and share the stories of the people they admire as well, because that's your legacy. I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother, I'm a great grandmother. And I hope to believe that I'm an example for all of them, and to show them that, like my husband, their father, grandfather, great grandfather, he was a policeman for 28 years. And being in Canada, we lived in some really small communities. And that one part of the career before I ever joined the force, there was a knock on the door, and it was a couple of teenagers. And they said, can we talk to Constable Les? Because he had built that trust with these teenagers that they could come and talk to him. Another one we had, it was open range and a cow had been hit, and this man brought this young person to do an accident report. And believe me, this small places, right? And he says, we don't like the officers that work that's working tonight. Will you do our accident report? So, you know, it's a legacy, and this is 30, 40 years ago that this happened, but it's those memories, but not everybody knows those stories to recognize, and you need them too. We all need those stories to remind us that what we're doing or what we strive to do is important and will make a difference. And so thank you very much.
Can I give a shout out real quick to Ben Alexander there? I know you're very quiet. Hey, Semper Fi, brother. Love at you. I miss you from being down in that warm weather. It's starting to get cold up here in Michigan, so maybe send me some warm weather. I want to thank you for your service to the Corps, for your sacrifices. You've been a voice down there, and you have paid a price personally, and you have done one heck of a job working with those youth and Travis Manion Foundation, all that, and our friends at Travis Manion. I want to thank you for that, and I want to just call you out in a good way and say thank you for all the stuff you've done. You've taken a courageous stand, and I want the absolute best for you in the future. So Semper Fi, brother.
Hey, Paul. I wanted to show you my inspiration, my mentor. That guy right there over my shoulder is my dad. 28 years, King County Sheriff's Detective, another 8 with the Washington State Attorney General's office. That photo was taken in '82, and he was working on the Green River Murder Task Force. He's the reason that I became a first responder.
Wow.
But, you know, he and I have never really talked about his service. And that's one of the reasons why I love this group, because it gives me an opportunity, sort of, to get an idea of maybe what he went through, and maybe to learn how I might be able to get him to talk about it. He was in the sex crimes unit, and then when he was with the Attorney General's office, he spent 8 years doing civil commitment investigations for Washington's sexual predator civil commitment laws. And to imagine having done that for that long without having an impact, there's no way. And so I just wanted to thank you for sharing that. And you know, I spent a long time in hell. Felt like I was wearing a gasoline jacket, and spent a night with a gun in my mouth. And now that I've reached what I call a mental equinox, I'm blessed to spend more time in the light than in the dark. That's what makes this group so amazing, because all of us have had that at some level, and all of us now are deciding to take our experiences and turn back toward that dark place and find our brothers and sisters and help them out. And so I just wanted to say what an honor it is to hear your story, because that's what it inspires me to continue my work training as a peer support specialist and a trauma chaplain. I get so much inspiration when folks like you come and talk on here. I just can't even tell you.
Todd, thank you. My former father-in-law worked in the same kind of area for 36 years, so you can imagine what he saw. And we would hike. He was a life mentor. He and I would hike before he got sick and everything. And the stories he would tell me, and I'm like, how did he ever process that? So I'm sure he had a similar story to your father's. What he did towards his retirement before he got sick, he volunteered out in the community and gave back and served people. And the stories he told me of things he had to process through, and it was like people in and around his life had no idea. He was keeping the worst of the worst of the worst behind bars, and even his own family didn't know. And I said, well, you need to talk about it. I'll listen, because I know a few people like that I put in jail, right? So hats off to you, and hats off to your father. If I could add one more thing, Sarah, are we okay on time? So one of our life mentors, we interact with him on a weekly basis. And I was sharing, I think, Dave and Sarah, we walk with him for about 2 hours a week, and we just process life with what we're doing because of the work I do and because of the work my wife does. And we're very open about that. But he's in the critical incident management world too, and helps down here in the county, and is heavily involved in the law enforcement support. And I'm telling you, the blessing that he receives from helping them, I'm like, you're helping my family. You keep doing that, right? Because he has that heart. And even though they're dealing with, and let's just face it, it's the worst of the worst of the worst stuff, right? He still has an impact, and they have a safe place to unload versus stacking that away in file 13. That doesn't work, by the way. It doesn't work. And so my message to all of you, and you already know this, and I tell this to my other brothers and sisters, they're like, oh, I don't need that. I'm like, you will someday. You will someday. So better now, so you can continue on your career. Better now, so you can still have a good life and spend less time in the darkness, as you mentioned. So Todd, thank you.
That's really powerful. You have a way of making people feel very comfortable, Paul. I feel like you started a really great conversation, and just coming on, being so genuine, sharing your story, appreciating other people, talking about the people who have mentored you and meant so much to you, bringing your friends on, that's really, really great. And just for all of you who are on now, even for the first time, you are always welcome here. This is another family, and we welcome you. Is there anybody else that wants to make a comment or ask a question before we start wrapping it up?
I just want to say, Paul, it's amazing. I have, me and you've talked for the past couple weeks here, so it's funny how 18 years ago, when I come home from Iraq, the only thing we had then was, the only options we had was to go to the VA and get filled with medication after medication after medication after medication, until finally it says, you know what, screw this, alcohol, cocaine, there's got to be something better than this, because, and several times in my past that I got tired of that and I wanted to give up, and I just kept listening to that inner self. And you talk about a while ago when you were saying, you become who you surround yourself with, is kind of how I took that in perspective. But I've noticed since I've got involved with the Yellow Secure Foundation over about 1.5 years ago, I went from like 3,500 friends on Facebook down to, I think I'm down to 413. And every one of those are basically people of my new circle that I talk to and do things with, and the people that I was in the military with, and of course, and then of course my kids and stuff like that. But I'm thankful to have found found this group through Paul, and I'm thankful for the All Secure Foundation, because actually that's how me and Paul met, was through Tom. And just, it's amazing story. And the only last thing I got for you really, Paul, is keep training, buddy. March will be here before you know it.
So, yeah, just so in the interest of full disclosure, Lucas is threatening to outruck me in March, just so you all know. So you can check in with him and see if he actually beat the old man. I think I have him by a few years. So he's throwing down the gauntlet, and I'm out there training very hard.
Hey, I packed my ruck today for 7 miles, and I got in and weighed it. It was 95 pounds.
Oh, man. I'm doing a little 10-pounder in interest of full disclosure here.
And I just got released from the doctor today.
I know you said, yeah, you're coming off that.
Yeah.
Sarah, that's a, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I'm good. I'm ready to go back jumping out of airplanes again, but he's not saying yes to that yet.
Sarah, that's a great documentary. I watched that. I strongly recommend that for everybody if you haven't seen that. It's one of the best I've seen. It's a very it's intellectually sound. I'm not a medical authority or psychological authority, but I will just say from the networks I run in, it's a very sound documentary that's very fair treatment of what's really out there that people can consider. And Tom would say this too. And I think Jen says this, it's bits and pieces of little things for all of us to be a little bit different. So
Yeah. Yeah, Michael Geyer is such a great guy, and this is a labor of love. He had other projects going on, and when he met this one veteran who was on like 18 meds, like Lucas, what you're saying too, he's like, what, and he said, we've got to figure out something different. So he went on, and for 3 years he just researched and talked to people about other, just anything to help veterans get their lives back. And he did another documentary for it's Healing the Heroes of 9/11. And David Perez is very close into this effort. And we have Daniel Jarvis from 22-0 that was on that documentary, actually on our Coffee and Conversation talk tomorrow at 11 a.m.
Wow.
So if you have the email that I sent out, just check in with that. And it's another interesting modality. David, do you want to share a little bit about that?
Sorry, muted issues there. Sure. Yeah, the documentary that Michael did is fascinating. He actually asked me to be in it, which I respectfully declined. I wasn't there yet, and at this point have regrets, but so happy that John Walker was in it. He kind of represents my position in the whole scenario. So if you haven't seen the movie or the documentary yet, I highly recommend it. And Dan Jarvis, 22-0, they are doing a version of like EMDR type therapy where they are having you relive the trauma through a peer representative in a black and white version. I don't want to give too much of it away, especially if you're interested in doing it. And they allow you to reprocess the issues that are plaguing you and store them in a different place in your brain. So essentially what happens is it's filed in a different filing cabinet, one that doesn't respond to emotion. So the events are still there. It's not like they're making you forget them. It's not voodoo science that makes crap just disappear. It's just allowing your brain to process it differently and file it somewhere else. Whereas when you are thinking about it, or when you are engaged in a corresponding discussion or incident, or I hate the word, but a trigger mechanism for that type of incident, your emotional response is going to be different. It'll be a very flat response versus something that is extreme. So it's they're doing amazing work there, and I've gone through the process, and it was life-changing for me. It's not something that happens instantaneously. It's something that your brain will start to process over time. But I woke up the next day feeling different, seeing things different. My wife and I just had this conversation last night. I haven't yelled in 6 weeks. Just haven't yelled for any reason. I'm at the point where I just don't give a shit. Like nothing. You can't get me to that point at this right now. And I don't think it's successful after just once. For some people, depending on what they've been through, you may have to go through the process a few times to make sure everything's placed properly. And you may have, various traumas that you want to run that process through, or run through that process, I should say. But yeah, the movie's awesome. Everybody should watch it. He actually, Michael just put out something. There's going to be a viewing of it down in Tampa, I think it was, or somewhere in Florida. And it's on YouTube. It's all free, so it's all paid for by 22Zero's nonprofit.
Yeah, I can't wait for that tomorrow. I'm really looking forward to hearing more about it. So thanks, David. And just to let you all know too, we're having Sarah Metz on this call next Thursday night, and she is the wife of Nick Metz, who's the retired police chief. And they have an organization called Code for Counseling. So it sounds like it's going to be really interesting. It's a lot of the psychology specifically for veterans and first responders. So anyway, again, Paul, I just want to thank you so much for coming on. I hope you'll come back, and all of you who are visiting tonight, just know that you do have a family here. We loved having you all. So thank you.